Joining me now is the former Secretary of the Treasury under President Obama, Jack Lew. He also served as Obama's Chief of Staff and the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Secretary Lew, thank you for joining me. I want to ask you about the fact that Mitch McConnell has said that at least 20 of his members of Congress say enough is enough. We've done enough for people. We heard the Treasury Secretary, your successor in the job, saying that this is not appropriate to give people this much money to stay home. How do you characterize this as someone who was at the helm of the Treasury?
Well, it's good to be with you, Ali, and I'm glad that by all reports that it was a good meeting yesterday. It's about time. The House Democrats passed a bill 2.5 months ago, and the Senate has been slow rolling it and only taking it up and never bringing it to a vote even until today. Yesterday was the first serious discussion, even though the benefits, the unemployment benefits expired, the eviction protections expired. I have to tell you, as a macroeconomic matter, the need is great. It's a crisis. And you don't have to take my word for it. Look at what the chair of the Fed, Jay Powell, has been saying. His predecessors, Janet Yellen and Ben Bernanke, Republican economists like Glenn Hubbard, Ken Rogoff, a Harvard economist who was making the case that we needed to balance the budget. They're all saying we need to do something large to avoid having the economy go into a nosedive. Now, it's not just about numbers. You can get into a debate between $1 trillion and $3 trillion and forget that what it's really about is values. It's about what are we going to do to solve a crisis. You just need to do the things that will keep the economy from collapsing and keep families from going into states of real crisis. Just to put a few numbers on it, you have 7 million children living in households that are behind on the rent. You have between 8 and 15 million children living in houses that don't have enough food to put on the table. What is the Senate doing about this? Close to nothing. That costs money. I would argue that every dollar you put into those households will get spent and will help stimulate the economy. I think that the bringing to the table a proposal to increase the tax deduction of business lunches and doing nothing to put food on the table for starving families, that's a question of values. That's not a question of money. A bill is unacceptable if it doesn't deal with the most vulnerable.
You can argue it both ways. It's absolutely a question of values. But even if you looked at it as a question of money, for those Republican senators who are saying enough is enough, when you look back to the 2008-2009 recession, those places into which we strategically put money into the stimulus, into the bank bailouts, into the auto companies, that was obviously before the recession, they actually do return properly because, to your point, when someone is desperate for money and you provide that money, they spend all of it. This isn't extra money for a guy like me or someone like you. This is where people need it to actually spend, to either keep their businesses open or to buy food or to pay their rent. Better than 100% of that money gets spent. So your financial, your economic return, if that's how your mind works, also puts it in the right place. But the concept that these senators are saying enough is enough, we've spent enough while there are starving children in America, seems to be the wrong place for us.
No, I totally agree, Ali. I think to compare this to the financial crisis, one has to remember that none of the people we're talking about had anything to do with creating this crisis. This crisis is driven by a health crisis, an incompetent response by our government, and a continuing denial of what it will take to both test and track and trace and to make it safe for children to go back to school and for people to go back to work. We need to deal with that in order to get out of this economic crisis. But let's also remember that when the health crisis passes, this is a big hole in the economy. It's going to have a lingering impact. People will need things like unemployment insurance until jobs are back for them to go to. The idea that people are choosing not to work is ludicrous. You can find a story here and there. For the most part, people can't go back to work. There could have been a debate between $600 and some other number, but $200 is grossly inadequate. It will leave families without enough money to pay their rent and feed their families. We need to do better than that.
We can do better than that. Treasury Secretary, former U.S. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew, it's good to talk to you. Thank you for being with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.